He had been watching her all afternoon, the way her hands moved, the quiet curve of her smile, and when she suddenly slipped into flawless German, Jerry Schneider knew this wasn't chance. Some obsessions don't end well, but only time will tell what happens with this one.
Hello, if you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and tap the notification bell. Type in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as touching as this one, or maybe even crazier. And you don't want to miss it. Now let's begin.
The diner in Atlanta buzzed with its usual Saturday rhythm. Plates clattered, coffee pots hissed, the faint smell of bacon and grits clung to the air. Shelly Peterson wove between tables with practiced grace, balancing trays heavy with orders. To anyone watching, she was just another waitress. Professional smile, quick hands, polite words. But behind her eyes, there was a weariness, the kind of tired that no amount of sleep could cure. She had learned to live this way, hiding the bruises of her heart beneath lipstick and a crisp apron. Her failed marriage to Anthony had left her with little more than debts, doubts, and a vow never to let another man define her again. In this diner, she could control the script. How wide she smiled, how kind her words sounded, how invisible her pain remained. At corner table 7, a man in his late 50s sat with a cup of black coffee. Jerry Schneider. He wasn't supposed to be here. Business had brought him from Chicago to Atlanta, but this diner wasn't on the agenda. Still, he found himself there, tie loosened, a paper folded beside his untouched eggs. His eyes, sharp, restless, kept flicking toward Shelly. It wasn't unusual for Jerry to notice women. He always had. He dated since his divorce, but most of it was empty. Dinners that ended in polite indifference, brief flings that didn't last beyond a season. Yet something about Shelly caught him differently. The way her eyes softened when she bent to speak to an older couple, the way she carried herself, quiet dignity under pressure. He told himself it was just passing admiration, harmless, but his gaze lingered longer than he liked. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, Jerry's life was a museum of success and silence. The penthouse was spotless, its floor-to-ceiling glass walls staring out over Lake Michigan. The polished oak desk bore contracts worth millions, yet his fridge carried little more than bottled water and leftovers he never ate. Success was his currency, but love was bankrupt. His ex-wife had left with bitterness. His daughter, now in Munich, barely answered his calls. The truth was, Jerry Schneider was a man admired publicly, pitied privately. A millionaire with no one to spend his wealth on except himself. And that emptiness was why he noticed Shelly more than he should have. Back in the diner, Shelly delivered pancakes to a young boy and ruffled his hair when he whispered a thank you. For a moment, her smile was real, unguarded. Jerry caught it and felt something stir. He shifted uncomfortably, forcing his eyes to his newspaper. Then it happened. At the far table, 2 elderly tourists struggled with the menu. Their voices carried a distinct rhythm, German. Shelly leaned closer, then answered them in perfect, lilting German. Her posture relaxed. Her laugh came freer than Jerry had seen all morning. The old couple's faces lit with delight, and Shelly slipped seamlessly into conversation, explaining the menu with charm and ease. Jerry froze. He had admired her before, but this was different. He had not expected depth, not this hidden brilliance beneath the surface of an ordinary diner waitress. German. He hadn't heard it spoken so richly since his last visit to Europe. It pulled at something buried deep within him. Memories of Munich, of his daughter's childhood, of a life he had abandoned to chase boardrooms and balance sheets. Now this woman, the one he had already noticed, was speaking the language of his ghosts. His admiration twisted into something sharper, a curiosity he couldn't walk away from. The morning crowd thinned. Shelly cleared plates, humming under her breath. Jerry checked his watch, paid his bill, and stood. For a moment, he considered leaving without a word, but as he slipped a hand into his jacket pocket, his fingers brushed the crisp envelope he had written the night before. He drafted it with no recipient in mind, a habit he sometimes kept when loneliness pressed too hard. A note, handwritten, paired with a first-class flight ticket to Berlin he had booked for himself, but wasn't sure he wanted to use. He looked at Shelly one last time. Her laughter in German echoed in his ears. He left the envelope on the edge of the table, his coffee untouched, his breakfast barely eaten, and walked out into the Atlanta sun. Shelly, tired but curious, would soon discover it. Have you ever met someone who, in just one unexpected moment, revealed a side of themselves that completely changed the way you saw them? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it.
The envelope sat on the edge of the table, cream-colored against the dark laminate, almost blending into the clutter of receipts and napkins. Shelly spotted it as she came around with her rag and coffee pot. At first, she assumed it was a forgotten bill or a tip left behind. But as her fingers touched it, she felt its weight, not just paper, something else. She glanced toward the door, but the man from table 7 was already gone. All that remained was the faint trace of his cologne, something clean and expensive, lingering in the air. Shelly slipped the envelope into her apron pocket and went back to bussing tables. She didn't open it right away. Years of disappointment had taught her caution. Good things rarely came without strings. But curiosity gnawed her, and when the last breakfast crowd cleared out, she ducked behind the counter, fingers trembling as she slid the note free. The handwriting was sharp, deliberate. Your voice belongs to more than this diner. Berlin waits. J.S. Her breath caught. Beneath the note was a boarding pass. Atlanta to Berlin. First class. Departure in 3 days. Her heart slammed against her ribs. For a second, she thought it was a joke, a cruel prank. But no one she knew could afford this. No one she knew even thought of her in these terms. She flipped the ticket over, half expecting to find conditions written on the back. Nothing, just her name, printed neatly, Shelly Peterson. Her legs went weak, and she sat heavily on the stool by the register. Berlin. She hadn't heard that city name in years, not since her grandmother told stories of her youth there. War-torn streets, rebuilding, resilience. Her grandmother had been her only anchor, the one who had taught her German when everyone else dismissed it as useless. Speaking it now felt like a secret inheritance, a private thread connecting her to something bigger than herself. And this stranger, this millionaire she barely knew, had somehow reached into that thread and tugged. Shelly, you okay? Her coworker Jasmine leaned over with a pitcher of sweet tea. She caught the edge of the boarding pass before Shelly could slip it back into the envelope. Jasmine's eyes widened. Girl, is that what I think it is? Shelly hissed, keep your voice down. She shoved the envelope deep into her apron. Who gave you that? Jasmine pressed. Shelly's gaze flicked to the corner empty table. The man sitting there, older, white, gray at the temples. Jasmine's grin spread slow. Mystery sugar daddy vibes. It's not like that, Shelly snapped. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure what it was. That evening, Shelly sat at her small kitchen table, the envelope laid out like contraband. Bills surrounded it. Electric, water, overdue credit cards, reminders of her very real life. Berlin might as well have been another planet. She told herself it was ridiculous, dangerous even. Who leaves a plane ticket for a stranger? She thought of her ex-husband, Anthony, and his empty promises. She thought of all the times she'd let hope make her foolish. But yet, her grandmother's voice whispered in memory, Shelly, Sprache ist Macht. Language is power. One day it will open doors you never imagined. Was this that door? Miles away in his hotel room, Jerry Schneider sat in the dark, tie undone, staring at his phone. He hadn't expected to leave the envelope. He hadn't even planned it. The ticket had been his, a one-way attempt at reconnecting with his daughter in Munich. At the last minute, he wrote Shelly's name instead, sliding it across the counter like a gambler placing his final bet. Now doubt gnawed at him. What if she thought him insane?
What if she tore it up and cursed his arrogance? But the image of her bright-eyed, laughing in German, hidden brilliance spilling into that diner wouldn't leave him. He hadn't felt something stir like that in years. The next morning at the diner, Shelly avoided looking at the corner booth. She worked her tables with mechanical efficiency, her mind consumed by the envelope still sitting on her nightstand at home. Every time the door opened, her chest tightened. Was he back? Was he watching her reaction? But Jerry didn't come, and the silence of his absence only deepened the mystery.
The boarding pass lay on Shelly's nightstand like it was mocking her. Every time she entered her bedroom, her eyes went straight to it, no matter how hard she tried to look away. The bold letters, Atlanta to Berlin, glared at her like a dare. She stuffed it back into the envelope, slid the envelope into the top drawer, and slammed it shut. "Not for me," she muttered. Still, she couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned on the thin mattress of her one-bedroom apartment, hearing the voices of everyone who had ever told her she was foolish to dream. Her mother's sharp warning, "Men like that don't see women like us. Don't fool yourself, Shelly." Her ex-husband's sneer when she once mentioned traveling to Europe. "You think you're better than me, huh? Speaking German doesn't change who you are." Those voices kept her rooted in fear. The next morning, Shelly dressed for her shift, her reflection in the mirror showing a polished version of the woman who felt like she was crumbling inside. She tied her apron tight and rehearsed her mantra: smile, serve, survive. At the diner, she worked with mechanical precision, eyes avoiding the corner booth where he had sat. Coworkers teased her in whispers. Jasmine, ever the instigator, leaned in while wiping down a counter. "So," Jasmine drawled, "did your prince sweep you away yet?" Shelly shot her a glare. "It's not like that. Girl, if somebody left me a first-class ticket to Berlin, you'd be watching my Instagram live from the plane." Shelly didn't answer. She couldn't admit how much the idea tempted her. Meanwhile, Jerry sat in his hotel suite, tie loosened, laptop open, but ignored. He'd been scheduled to fly back to Chicago yesterday. Instead, he extended his stay another week. His assistant called twice, reminding him of board meetings. He ignored her. He told himself he was staying for business, deals in Atlanta, prospective partnerships. But deep down, he knew better. He was waiting to see if Shelly would show up at the airport with that ticket in hand. But the day passed, and she didn't come. That should have been enough to close the chapter, to tuck the moment away as a strange impulse, a passing fascination. Instead, he found himself haunted by it. Jerry had always been good at justifying his behavior. He told himself that he wasn't obsessed, just curious. He replayed her laughter in his mind, the way her German rolled off her tongue with confidence and warmth. He told himself that maybe it wasn't even about her at all. It was about what she represented, a spark of authenticity in a world that had grown sterile and shallow. But late at night, alone with a glass of scotch, he admitted the truth. He wanted her. Not just for her beauty, though he admired that before he ever heard her speak, but for the way she reminded him of what he had lost. Shelly tried to bury herself in routine. She picked up extra shifts, ran errands, filled her evenings with mindless television. But the ticket's ticking deadline gnawed at her. She even tried to rationalize it away. Maybe it was a scam. Maybe he was some kind of predator. What kind of man leaves a flight ticket to a stranger? Yet another voice whispered through her doubts. What if it's not a trap? What if it's an escape? She caught herself staring out her apartment window at the planes tracing silver lines across the sky. Each one felt like a taunt. Freedom, if only she was bold enough to claim it. 3 days turned into 4, 4 into 5. The ticket expired. Shelly told herself it was a relief, safer this way. She didn't know that across the city, Jerry sat in his hotel suite, watching the departure board on his phone, waiting for her flight number to vanish into departed. When it did,
Something inside him sank. He closed his laptop and told himself it was over. She had chosen her life. He had no right to interfere. And yet neither of them felt closure. Instead, the unspoken pull between them only grew heavier, like two magnets trying to resist, the space between them charged with what-ifs. The diner's rhythm continued as if nothing had changed. Coffee poured, orders shouted, plates clattered. But every time Shelly passed table 7, she felt a hollow ache, as if something had been left unfinished. And Jerry? He told himself he was leaving Atlanta for good. But fate had other plans. Because sometimes resistance only makes the inevitable stronger.
Atlanta had a way of shrinking, even in the city of millions. Shelly told herself the millionaire with the silver hair and sharp eyes was gone, off to his glass tower in Chicago. The expired ticket was proof. His offer had been a fleeting whim, not meant for her. But fate doesn't follow neat timelines. It was Tuesday afternoon when Shelly's shift ended early. Jasmine begged her to stay for an extra hour, but Shelly refused. She was drained. Bills waited, laundry piled, and she wanted silence more than tips. She slipped out the back entrance of the diner, tied her scarf against the late September breeze, and ducked into the coffee shop 2 blocks down. She ordered her usual, a chai latte, and sank into the corner with her notebook. Writing had become her secret outlet. Scribbles about her grandmother's stories, broken lines of poetry, fragments of a life she dreamed of. It was the only place she let her real voice out. The bell above the door jingled. She didn't look up at first, but then a presence filled the space, commanding without being loud. She glanced up, and her heart jolted. Jerry Schneider. He hadn't shaved that morning. His tie was loose, jacket folded over one arm, but the weight of wealth still clung to him. His eyes scanned the shop, landed on her, and held. She cursed her under her breath, snapping her notebook shut. He approached with deliberate steps, stopping just before her table. "May I?" His voice was low, restrained, as if he already expected her refusal. Shelley's lips parted, ready to dismiss him, but something, curiosity, defiance, maybe both, made her nod. Jerry sat. For a moment neither spoke. The hum of the espresso machine filled the silence, punctuated by the hiss of steaming milk. "You didn't take the ticket," Jerry said finally. Her chest tightened. "I don't take things from strangers." "You're right not to. But I'm not a stranger. Not anymore." She frowned. "You don't know me. You don't know anything about me except that I speak German and serve pancakes." Jerry leaned forward, elbows on the table. "That's enough to know you don't belong in a diner. At least, not forever." Her anger flared. "And what makes you the authority on where I belong? Because you wear expensive suits and leave tickets like breadcrumbs?" For the first time, Jerry smiled. Not the polished business smile, but something real. Fair enough. He sat back, conceiving. Maybe I was arrogant. Maybe I still am. But I meant it when I said Berlin waits. That city? It changes people. Shelly shook her head. "I don't need saving." "I didn't say you did. But maybe you deserve a chance to save yourself." The words hung between them, subtle, disarming. Shelly looked away, focusing on the swirl of her untouched latte. Her throat tightened, torn between anger and the strange warmth blooming in her chest. She wanted to tell him to leave. She wanted to dismiss him like she had dismissed her ex-husband's promises, her coworkers' teasing, her own buried dreams. But she didn't. Instead, she asked quietly, "Why me?" Jerry's answer was simple. "Because I remind you of something I lost a long time ago, and I can't ignore that." The silence that followed was heavier than words. Jerry didn't press further. He just sat there, his presence both unsettling and steady, until Shelly finally rose. "I have to go." He nodded, as if expecting it, and let her leave without protest. That night, Shelly replayed the encounter in her head. His words echoed, "Maybe you deserve a chance to save yourself." And for the first time, She wondered if he wasn't offering her an escape, but a mirror. The very next evening, fate tightened the knot. A storm swept into Atlanta, grounding flights and snarling traffic. Shelley found herself stranded when the bus line shut down early. Rain lashed the streets, her thin jacket no match for the downpour. She ducked under an awning, shivering. A black sedan slowed to a stop in front of her. The window rolled down. Jerry, in the driver's seat, eyes cautious but steady. "Need a ride?" She hesitated, soaked to the bone, pride warring with practicality. Finally, she opened the door and slid inside. In the confined space of the car, silence pressed close. The rain hammered the windshield. Atlanta blurred outside. Shelley clutched her damp scarf, Jerry's cologne filling the air. Neither of them said it aloud, but both knew. Forced or not, proximity had found them.
The rain hammered Jerry's car as he drove Shelley through the flooded Atlanta streets. The wipers swiped furiously, but visibility stayed poor. Silence pressed between them like a third passenger, heavy and taut. "Where do you live?" Jerry asked finally. "East Point," she replied, her voice clipped. He nodded. No more questions, just the steady hum of the engine and the storm. But as they crawled through traffic, Jerry found his eyes flicking toward her, wet hair clinging to her cheeks, hands clenched tight around her scarf. She looked like someone bracing against more than rain. By the time they reached her apartment building, the storm had worsened. Jerry parked under the awning, and Shelley hesitated before unbuckling. "Do you want to come up for a moment?" she asked, surprising herself. Jerry raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" She nodded quickly, almost too quickly. "It's just coffee. You shouldn't drive back out in this." Her apartment was small, barely 2 rooms, but neat. The faint smell of lavender clung to the air. She handed him a towel, then busied herself in the kitchenette, filling a kettle. Jerry wondered, noting the stack of bills on the table, the notebooks piled neatly in a corner, and the framed photo of an older woman, stern-eyed, regal, with the unmistakable lines of German heritage. "Your grandmother?" he asked. She stiffened. "Yes. She raised me after my mom worked double shifts. She taught me German, said it would keep me connected to something bigger than myself." Jerry's voice softened. "She sounds remarkable." "She was," she replied, her voice clipped. "She passed 5 years ago. Cancer." For the first time that night, her mask cracked. She poured the boiling water into mugs, hands trembling slightly. "She was the only one who ever believed I could be more than this." She gestured to her uniform. Jerry accepted the mug, his eyes steady on her. And she was right. They sat opposite each other, steam rising between them. For a long moment, Shelley stared into her cup. Then, as though a dam broke, the words spilled out. "My husband cheated on me, over and over. I stayed longer than I should have, thinking I could fix it, thinking if I loved him harder, he'd come back. But he didn't. He just left me emptier than I was before." Her voice cracked, and she laughed bitterly. "So, forgive me if I don't trust men who leave me tickets to Europe. I've had enough of being someone's experiment." Jerry didn't flinch. He set his mug down and leaned forward, his own guard lowering. "You think I don't understand betrayal? I built an empire, Shelley. I had everything money could buy. But in the process, I lost the only people who mattered. My wife resented me. My daughter. She moved to Munich for college. And now she won't even take my calls. I left her birthdays unanswered, recitals unattended. I chose boardrooms over bedtime stories. And now I'm a stranger to her." The pain in his voice startled Shelley. It wasn't the polished tone of a millionaire. It was the raw ache of a father who'd failed. For a moment, silence filled the room. Shelley's eyes softened. "That's why you were going to Berlin." "To see her?"
Jerry nodded slowly. Yes, I bought that ticket for myself. But when I heard you speak in German, you reminded me of everything I had lost, everything I wanted to fight for again. And I thought, maybe you deserve that chance too. Her chest tightened, torn between anger and empathy. She wanted to accuse him again of arrogance, but the sincerity in his voice disarmed her. The rain eased outside, the storm settling into a soft drizzle. Jerry stood, preparing to leave. Thank you for the coffee. Shelly rose too, her voice gentler now. Jerry, she hesitated, then asked the question gnawing at her. Do you always chase women like me? Women who don't look like you? His gaze met hers, unwavering. I chase something real. And right now, that's you. Her breath caught. The storm inside her hadn't passed, but for the first time, she let herself feel the quiet possibility of what his words meant. The truth was out now. Her betrayal, his estrangement, and their wounds bared. And though nothing was resolved, the connection between them had shifted. Stronger, heavier, more dangerous. They weren't strangers anymore. They were two broken people, staring into each other's scars and recognizing their own reflection.
The storm had passed, leaving the streets washed clean. But inside Shelly's apartment, the air still felt charged. Jerry hadn't left. Not yet. They sat on the worn couch, mugs refilled, the lavender scent faint in the background. The tension between them had shifted. It wasn't hostile anymore. It was fragile, like glass. Shelly broke the silence first. You know, I almost went. Jerry looked at her, brow furrowed. Went where? The flight. The ticket. I packed a bag. I even called the cab company. But then I thought, what kind of woman flies across the world because a stranger tells her to? I thought I'd look desperate. Jerry's lips curved faintly. Maybe it would have been brave instead. She laughed softly, shaking her head. Brave or stupid, hard to tell sometimes. They talked long into the night about her grandmother's stories of Berlin, snow falling on cobbled streets, music drifting from beer halls, about Jerry's daughter, Elise, the last birthday he'd missed, the voicemail he still replayed in secret just to hear her voice. At one point, Jerry tried to make coffee and nearly broke Shelly's old percolator. She burst into laughter, clutching her stomach, and he looked at her with mock indignation. "You're laughing at me?" he said. "I am," she grinned, wiping tears from her eyes. "You look completely helpless without your assistant, don't you?" He raised a finger in mock warning. "Careful, millionaires bruise easily." The joke hung between them, but instead of feeling bitter, it turned warm. For the first time, they allowed themselves to laugh together, not as Waitress and Millionaire, but as two flawed humans sharing the same couch. Later, Jerry offered to drive her to the rooftop of a hotel downtown, a place he'd discovered on one of his late-night wanderings. The city stretched wide below them, Atlanta glowing in amber lights, cars threading through the veins of the streets. "It looks different from up here," Shelly murmured. "Most things do," Jerry replied. She leaned against the railing, the breeze tugging at her hair. "When I was little, my grandmother used to tell me that the world is bigger than the box you're born into. I always believed her, but somehow life shrinks that box until you're trapped." Jerry's voice softened. "Maybe it's not too late to step out of it." She turned to him, their faces close in the night air. His expression wasn't predatory, wasn't arrogant, just open, tired, hopeful. For a heartbeat, Shelly felt safe, and that safety scared her more than danger ever had. They sat in silence, watching the city lights flicker. Shelly's hand brushed the railing, then his. Neither moved it away. The bond was fragile, but it was real. A thread of possibility stretched between them, humming with quiet promise. And though neither admitted it out loud, both knew this was the calm before the storm. Because happiness this raw
This sudden doesn't stay untouched for long. Have you ever met someone who made you laugh again after you thought joy was gone for good? How did it change you? Share your story. I promise others need to hear it too.
The night on the rooftop had left Shelly with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. For days afterward, she found herself humming under her breath, smiling at regulars in the diner, even writing again in her notebook. Jerry's presence lingered in her thoughts like a forbidden melody. But warmth is fragile, and suspicion is sharp. It started with a phone call. Shelly was clearing tables when Jasmine called her over, wide-eyed. "Girl, you're not going to believe this." She thrust her phone forward, showing a gossip blog. There was Jerry, smiling in a tuxedo, arm-linked with a younger woman in Chicago. The headline screamed, "Millionaire Schneider seen with model at gala." The air drained from Shelly's lungs. Her hands trembled so badly the plates nearly slipped. Jasmine frowned. "You okay?" Shelly forced a brittle smile. "Yeah, I'm fine." But inside, the old wound ripped open again. "Of course, I should have known. Men like him don't change. I was just a pastime." That evening, Jerry showed up at the diner, his presence commanding as ever. Shelly met him at the counter, fire blazing in her chest. "Enjoy your gala?" she snapped. He blinked. "What?" "Don't play dumb. I saw the pictures." Jerry exhaled, realizing. "Shelly, that was a fundraiser. She's a business partner's daughter. It wasn't what it looked like." Her laugh was bitter. "Isn't that what they all say?" The customers turned to glance, sensing the tension. Jerry lowered his voice, but his frustration showed. "Do you think I flew to Atlanta, sat in your apartment, shared my failures just to play games? You think I'd waste my time for a fling?" "Yes!" The word shot out like a bullet. Her voice cracked, the diner going silent around them. Jerry froze. The words sliced deeper than she knew. For a long, excruciating second, neither moved. Finally, Jerry's jaw tightened. "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe you don't want saving. Maybe you just want to stay in your box." Her eyes filled, but she didn't let him see her break. "Get out, Jerry." He hesitated, then turned and walked out. This time, he didn't look back. Shelly stood there, trembling, her chest caving in on itself. She had pushed him away, but wasn't that safer? Better than being made a fool again? Still, the emptiness gnawed. The laughter they'd shared, the city lights, the way he'd said her name, it all felt like it had happened to someone else, in another lifetime. That night, Shelly curled up in bed, staring at the ceiling. The sound of rain outside reminded her of the night he'd first driven her home. She pressed her fists to her eyes, whispering into the dark, "I can't do this again. I can't." And somewhere across the city, Jerry sat alone in his hotel room, a half-written message to his daughter glowing on the screen. He deleted it. He couldn't find the words. Both of them alone. Both of them shattered. Both wondering if it had all been a mistake.
Atlanta was heavy with humidity the next morning, but for Shelly, the world felt cold. She dragged herself through her shift at the diner, her smile brittle, her movements mechanical. Every laugh from the regulars grated on her. Every clink of dishes rang hollow. Jerry's absence was a weight. She tried to bury it, but the silence between them screamed louder than his presence ever had. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, notebook open, pen hovering. The page stayed blank. She wanted to write about Berlin, about her grandmother's courage, about second chances, but all she saw was Jerry's face when she'd shouted at him. The hurt in his eyes, the way he'd walked away without defending himself further. Her chest tightened. Why did I push him away? She told herself it was self-defense, but deep down, she knew it was fear. Fear that he was too good to be true. fear that she'd end up discarded again. She pressed the pen to paper, scrawling a single line. Maybe I'm the one who doesn't know how to stay. Across town, Jerry sat at a suite, staring at a glass of untouched whiskey. His phone lay on the table, Elise's number glowing in his contact. His thumb hovered, but he couldn't press call. Instead, he thought of Shelly. Her laughter when he broke the coffee pot. The way her eyes lit up at the rooftop view. The fire in her when she accused him, even if the words cut deeper than he cared to admit. He muttered into the empty room, "Maybe I'm not worth her trust. Maybe I never was." But then he remembered something Elise had once said when she was younger, before the distance grew too wide. "Daddy, people don't care about your money. They just want you to show up." The thought pierced him. For Shelly, for Elise, for himself. The next morning, Jerry made a choice. He walked into the airline office downtown, ticket in hand. He said, "Rebook this. 2 seats, Berlin, tonight." Meanwhile, Shelly folded laundry in her tiny apartment, her phone buzzing with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Hello?" A pause. Then Jerry's voice, low but steady. "Shelly, it's me. I'm flying to Berlin tonight, but this time I bought 2 tickets. One has your name on it. No games, no breadcrumbs, just a choice. Yours." Her breath caught, heart slamming against her ribs. "Why? After everything I said to you?" "Because," Jerry said quietly, "sometimes the only way to prove you mean it is to show up anyway." The line went silent. She pressed the phone to her ear, tears pricking hotly. She wanted to scream at him, to hang up, to say yes, to say no, all at once. She dropped into her chair, shaking. Could she risk it? Could she trust him? Could she trust herself? The rain began again outside, soft at first, then heavier, like the night their worlds first collided. Shelly closed her notebook and whispered into the quiet, "Grandma, what would you tell me?" She already knew the answer. As night fell, Shelly stood at a window, suitcase half packed on the bed behind her. Her phone buzzed with a boarding notification. Jerry had made his choice. Now the question hung in the air like a dare. Would she make hers?
The airport buzzed with travelers, rolling suitcases and garbled announcements in English and German. Shelly stood frozen at the gate, boarding pass in hand. She hadn't decided until the cab pulled up to the terminal. Even then, she'd nearly turned back. Her suitcase felt heavier than it should. Maybe because it carried more than clothes. It carried her grandmother's memory, her failed marriage, her fear of repeating mistakes. But when she spotted Jerry near the boarding doors, tall, composed, scanning the crowd with eyes that softened the moment they landed on her, she knew she had made the right choice. He didn't smile at first, didn't rush toward her. He just waited, giving her space to walk the last few steps on her own. When she reached him, he exhaled, relief breaking across his face. "You came." "I almost didn't," her voice trembled. "But then I thought, maybe brave and stupid aren't so different after all." Jerry chuckled softly, his eyes glistening. "Your grandmother would be proud." Munich, 2 days later. The city smelled of roasted chestnuts and rain-soaked stone. Street musicians played violins outside the Marienplatz, and the Gothic spires of the Neues Rathaus stretched into the gray sky. Jerry led Shelly through the square, his hand brushing hers, neither of them pulling away. He stopped in front of a small cafe, its windows fogged from the warmth inside. "This is where Elise comes sometimes," he said, nerves tightening his jaw. "I don't know if she'll even show up." Shelly squeezed his hand. "Then let's just wait." They sat inside, the clink of coffee cups filling the quiet. Shelly's stomach churned. She wasn't sure what scared her more, Jerry's daughter rejecting him or her own heart rejecting the hope she'd begun to feel. Then the door swung open. A young woman stepped in, dark hair tucked under a wool cap. Her eyes scanned the cafe, wary until they landed on Jerry. For a heartbeat, she froze. "Dad?" The word was soft, disbelieving. Jerry rose,
his voice breaking. Elise. She didn't run into his arms, not yet, but she stepped closer, her expression torn between anger and longing. Why now? Jerry swallowed hard. Because I finally realized showing up late is still better than not showing up at all. His voice cracked, and because I didn't want to miss another chance to know you. Elise's eyes shimmered. She glanced at Shelly, confusion flickering. Shelly spoke gently in German. Sometimes people lose their way, but sometimes they find someone who helps them come back. Elise's eyes widened, her lips parting. Jerry blinked at Shelly, startled. That moment again, like the diner, like the spark that started all of this. Tears spilled down Elise's cheeks, and this time she stepped forward into her father's embrace. Later, as they walked along the Isar River, Jerry reached for Shelly's hand. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. You don't have to. This isn't about saving me. It's about both of us finally choosing to live. He stopped, turning her to face him. No games this time, no breadcrumbs, just me asking plain and simple, stay, with me, for as long as it takes. Her heart swelled. For the first time since her failed marriage, the fear didn't outweigh the hope. She smiled, tears stinging her eyes. Yes, Jerry, I'll stay. That night the three of them shared dinner, Jerry, Elise, and Shelly. Conversation was awkward, laughter tentative, but it was real. It was family beginning to stitch itself together again. As they clinked glasses, Shelly thought of her grandmother, the stories of Berlin, the courage to step out of the box, the whisper that had guided her across the ocean. And she realized she wasn't running anymore. She was home. The story had begun with a German phrase in a noisy diner, a flight ticket slipped under a napkin. It ended here, on a quiet Berlin street, with love spoken not in words, but in the simple act of showing up. Because sometimes love isn't about grand gestures, it's about who stays.
Do you believe love and redemption can truly come after brokenness, no matter how late? Or are some chances gone forever? Share your heart. I want to hear your truth.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you love this story, you will definitely love the next one. It's more intriguing than you can ever imagine. So go ahead and watch it now. Click on the image on your screen right away to watch the next one. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It helps and encourages us to share the best human interest stories